now, and that way we'll have this. We might use it for internal review.
Yep.
It started in our Slack channel
Yep.
with some questions that you posed, Dennis.
Yep.
Now that we have the PowerShift community, of course, we might broaden it, and it might be a topic of discussion or how to PowerShift very conventional ways of thinking about business, right? Strategy, plan, business plans, action taking, goals, intentions, all those kind of things that we're going to talk about. Could be good for the PowerShift community as well. So yeah, it's really good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, I've been very busy here at Hyperport, doing all the work of a major implementation with actually it's 3 companies at the moment. There are, and the 4th is there's other coaches that are doing that, but we're in touch with them too. So so it's 3 companies that are all under that one roof, so to speak, and the larger ones are is like is it 500 people or something, and then 250 and 150 or something like that. So it's a lot of circles. And efforts are the ones of scaling, which is like internal training, mostly training every month, and then also doing like rolling out our own internal habit program. Actually, Lead Link habit program recently in German. So that's kind of the new development here. Pushing and trying out things like new apps, and so we created this app called the OMG Circle, Organisation Mensch Gemeinschaft. So
oh, that's right, I remember. Yeah.
So it's a kind of the partner circle, kind of parallel to that or similar to that. Also inspired by the association circle, or the association operations circle, and all that kind of, so that kind of work gets a home, and those are the people kind of creating the conditions for the general circle to follow its purpose, like so everything related to organizing the people related aspects of work that are building the foundation for people energizing roles meaningfully for the general circle. So and then exploring ways of combining that with personal development stuff, because it's becoming increasingly clear that we need to offer something there. We can't just let people hang in the air. We gotta do something, and so we're tackling that, and it has a home. That's the most important message.
It's a huge project. Congratulations. That's amazing. You're a year and some months in now?
Well, it's a full job.
The deployment, the adoption over
so it is going on, I think, 1.5 years now. I joined in half a year in,
right?
And now it's there's a lot of like over 50 circles or so are practicing. So we're trying to measure those with surveys and trying to get a sense of the health of the overall implementation, and specific hotspots where we would need to go in and sit, hold their hands, and while at the same time trying to raise overall competence of the practice by deep training facilitators or practitioners, kind of internal practitioner training. So that's kind of, in my sense, has worked so far, has worked pretty well, but now we're getting at the points where the real underlying tensions come to the forefront, because now the light slowly, gets brighter, and the stuff bubbles up, and why is that working that way? and
Yeah.
people are being exposed, or all patterns are being exposed, you know, motivations become clear, you know,
Yeah.
they're not
It's
being
one of
held
the things
always.
I love about this practice, holacracy in particular, is, and I've said forever that it turns the lights on. But as you get better, more skilled at processing tensions, all the pathways to process tensions, the real underlying transformation can occur when you
Yeah.
have real people processing those real underlying tensions into new constructs, new structures, new processes, new ways of thinking about the work. That's really hard. That's the big transformational shift. But until then, it can show up in a continuum. You know, there's always good, better, and best as you step into practice anything. And it's one of the things I love about the holacracy practice. You can start at the beginning and begin to learn to process tensions. And it feels a lot like kind of old school a bit, just reframed a bit. No job position descriptions or things, but roles and accountabilities. And then all of a sudden it starts getting much more real as you're able to process tensions from a kind of a power shifted frame,
Yeah.
from your own sense of autonomy, your own sense of what's needed. And I think this is a bridge into our conversation about conventional things that are still useful, but reframed a bit, like business plans
Yeah.
and strategy and goals and objectives, whether it be personal or otherwise. How do these things kind of transform when you begin to deepen and mature your practice? And I think this is one of the things that we've been wrestling with,
Yeah.
even in Encode, with some of the more seasoned holacracy practitioners. What does it mean to have a business plan? And I know this has given us a lot of controversial
First of
discussion.
all, what the fuck do we mean by that word? Because I think it's
exactly.
very, you know, it's very easy to get hung up. No, that's not it, because we weren't careful, like defining what is actually the semantics of what we're cooling about. Because is it you know, is it the business plan in Glassrock, you know, or is it you know, is it goals? Do we mean goals? Or I think that's like now in retrospect what the discussions we had, and you know, with the studying again, like your good old friend David Allen, making it work. About the different levels of engagement, you know, the horizons of work, or the horizons of your
Focus.
personal system.
Yeah.
It became clear to me actually what I was looking for, or what I was missing, and I guess Yo as well. Yo also looking, was like more like, okay, what are the goals, and how do we, what plans do we create to get there? Do we set goals at all, or is it just, you know, the high up here is the purpose and down here is the projects and actions, and we don't need nothing in between? No, we don't. We just skip that part, you know, that middle part. And I think it doesn't quite work that way.
I agree completely. So maybe we circle back to at least how I would hold when I hear someone say, what is a business plan? My mind immediately goes back to the conventional holding of that, the decades old plan, the classic business plan. And I've done these for years and years, right? And I've helped organizations actually craft business plans. So some of the characteristics of a business plan is it comes and arises from the management structure. Usually the C-level suite, the executives, the leadership stops what they're doing for a period of time, a day or 2 days or 3 days, and then invents a plan based on maybe sometimes some data, some idea of what they think the organization can achieve over some period of time, usually a year, most often 1 to 3 years. And it has some specific components to it: goals, objectives, measurements, constraints, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, the classic SWOT analysis. And it's all kind of invented from a room. It's the classic predict and control.
Mm-hmm.
It's the classic design up front. And when you don't have anything else to align or coordinate efforts, it's really useful.
Mm-hmm.
In a conventional organization, I think business plans have their place.
Well, it's the only
And
thing that gives you orientation, I guess, in that conventional environment, or one of the few things that do, apart from budgets.
I've seen them work really well. My favorite still is from Gazelles International. It comes out of the Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish, and it's the one-page business plan. And it's usually done in a day or 2-day settings with the key functional leaders, finance, operations, human resources, marketing, technology, whatever. And they get in a room and they go through a structured process to lay out a business plan in one page.
Mm-hmm.
And the one page part is really important because it's comprehensive enough, but not overly complex.
Yeah, if you cannot say it in one page, you don't have it down, right?
But the problem with that is it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then the plan is rolled out, and it's typically rolled down into the organization because it was the top management that does the plan, and it's the bottom. It's the top bottom thing in action. And to your point, there isn't a lot of translation layers between the broad goals and the individuals doing more specific work at different levels of scale. It doesn't translate. And then it begins to fall apart. And this is the classic problem or conundrum with conventional business planning. It serves, but it only goes so far. And I think when you're in a self-organized system that is dynamically sensing into what's needed on an ongoing basis, with multiple layers of scale doing the exact same thing, you can reimagine what planning looks like. Instead of a plan, you have always ongoing planning.
What I'm hearing is that one problem is it's coming top down. So a more dynamic version or a more self-organized version would have to originate from everywhere, or more voices or more perspectives or more circles would have to be actively included in actually generating the data upon any of this could be based on, or should be based on, not just the top circle getting together and just setting out the route because they don't have all the information.
Right. So I think exactly to that point, Dennis, every level of scale or every circle plans. And that's the conventional term, planning. But really what happened inside that room with the executives and in that 1 or 2 day offsite or downtime meeting is that they forced themselves to make hard decisions about what they could and couldn't do based on real data and constraints, financial constraints, market constraints, product availability, product development. They made the hard choices. It's what the management or leadership team does. They make the hard choices, right? And we're kind of trained that that's what a good leader does. It's making the call, calling the ball, figuring out what's possible. And what we want is that same sort of construction, making the hard call, but we want to do it systemically. And this is what a strategy meeting
from everywhere, right? So everybody needs to make the hard call, right?
Exactly. So the beautiful thing is the strategy meeting process also gets real data, objective and subjective data. What's actually happened in the last 3 months or 6 months or whatever? What's the look back or retrospective? Bringing that forward, a process that sets up the hard choice of where should we place our most precious resources, our time, energy, talent, money, whatever, and come up with a strategy statement that informs the decision-making process. And this is the beautiful thing. Now you have a distributed strategy that allows for the tough choices to be made at various levels of scale.
Well, the one flaw you could say, if we think about what we talked about just before, is that strategy statement emerges mainly at the top of the organizational hierarchy, so to speak, if you can say that. So the top circle. So I just wonder, how far is it formed by sub circles, if such exist? If how far, because they inherit the strategy from above. So I'm just thinking here. I like the strategy meeting process, obviously. At the same time, it just arose the question: okay, how did we ever make sure we didn't have the problem with encode because we're not that big. Everybody's, when everybody gets together to do the strategy meeting, it's like everybody, like there's no people. But if you just imagine if you have like 100 or 500 people and you have some perspectives and lower circles, and those are not represented in the top, kind of in the strategy meeting process of the top circle, how would that play? Is that a problem? Is it not a problem? It just sort of arose as a question. And, should there be some kind of inclusion of perspectives in some form or another, or representatives or whatever? What have you?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think the answer is yes, for sure. And because we have a natural nested holarchy, right? So we don't have top or bottom, but we have inside and outside, or more focused and more broad. And we have channels to process tensions, pathways to signal data. So the broadest strategy, as you said, is inherited by the next level, next functional level inside, next set of subcircles. And to the extent that the broader strategy works to help inform the subcircles work, great. Nothing more needed. No need to.
Otherwise, there will be signaling back up. That's what you're saying, right? If it doesn't work.
It's either signal back up, hey, this strategy feels fundamentally off based on the work we're doing inside this circle, or it's like, this strategy is a little abstract for what we're doing inside this circle.
It's translated.
Let's create a strategy that unpacks the broader into the more specific work of the functional unit that is doing the work in a particular segment of that strategy. And that goes on down or in the organizational holarchy until it gets to the most granular level. You can have strategies all the way down, subcircle, all the way down.
In your practice, let me ask you this. In your practice, have you ever experienced the subcircle signaling back up to the a higher circle or broader circle that a strategy formulation should be reconsidered because it just doesn't work?
Yeah, it's one of the things to listen to. Both lead and rep links are great signal sources for that. And rep links in particular would participate in the broader circle strategy.
Yeah, so no, just from practice, I'm just curious, like what's the empirical, how often does that happen? Because I think especially when you transition from the old strategy, from the old model to the new, then you might not want to question what comes from above, so to speak.
Exactly. I was going to say this goes right back to our opening conversation about maturity of practice. So when the lights come on and you're learning how to play with the rules, you may be a little timid to process those tensions. But I have seen, there are a couple of cases where I was involved in some larger deployments, and the strategy at the broader actually was ignoring some constraints of the subcircle, and it was kind of giving an unfunded mandate is a way I would language it. It's like, this is our strategy. We prefer this one thing over this other thing.
But we don't give you money to do that.
Well, it just didn't translate to the reality that was going on inside that circle. It was like, you can say that all day long, broader circle, but there's no way. You've missed a perspective. You've missed either the product is not developed, or our market isn't buying this product, or some other signal. And seeing that signal get back integrated is a way of shifting the strategy and aligning it more with reality. This is dynamic steering principles being played out with feedback loops between broader and narrower focuses. And I have seen that in larger implementations, and I think it's really elegant. It's not over-engineered. In other words, you don't need to do it until you do. And the sense of when comes from practice.
Mm-hmm.
And the better you are at sensing what the organization needs to express its purpose, it all kind of goes hand in hand. So it's not a complicated system because you can play it one step at a time, but it allows for complex adaptive signals to be processed in the broader whole.
Simple rules translating into complex behavior.
Yeah, if you play the game. And all you have to do is play the game through some simple rules.
All you have to do.
Well, and this again goes back to the Hyperport conversation, orienting people to the new rule set and learning how to play a different game. This is not a 6-month endeavor. This is not a 1-year endeavor. This never really ends. Still learning how to practice this better. So I think that's the upside. There's a downside though too. The upside is with things like holacracy, systems like holacracy that are completely dynamically steered with these signaling systems. You get a very robust dynamic process to always be planning, essentially. Always be stepping into, are we allocating our resources properly? What's the intermediary goal between broadest purpose and actual governance? So that strategy statement is the go-between. It lives between purpose and governance. Strategy informs or unpacks into projects, actions, different types of metrics.
Yeah, how are we going to express that purpose in
exactly.
the form of roles and circles?
And this is exactly why I say the business plan lives in GlassRock. And while I believe that's a true statement, it can be received as woefully inadequate. Because what do you mean? It's nebulous, right?
But you cannot pin it down precisely because governance is ever evolving. So
it is. So this brings up another tension. Would a subcircle need some way to illuminate the actual objectives, measurements and metrics, or OKRs, the actual projects and outcomes, the specific actions that the circle's roles are taking to enact the strategy or the plan? Is there a way to make that visible? And I think there's an opportunity there too. Like it would be super cool to somehow, software developers love that, to somehow have a strategy view of the circle, which is one way of thinking about the business plan view. What's going on from the business strategy? What objectives, what measurements, what projects are being initiated in that particular circle, and kind of a more conventional business plan view. That would be an interesting exercise. Maybe somebody should start a company to do that.
Tom, I was just thinking, so you, can you help me bring together in my mind? So you just talked about purpose being at the top, then you have the strategy, and then you have like the, let's say the areas of focus / roles, the governance structure, right? So that's connecting like the purpose with the concrete areas of focus / roles. And then here in GTD, we have purpose / principles at the top. Then we have vision, which we didn't talk about yet, if that fits in anywhere. And then we have goals. And then we have areas of focus. Then we have projects, and then we have actions. Those are the levels of GTD practice as defined by David Allen. So what I see now is, so the goal, what are goals? Like in this understanding, are they just outcomes? Then they would be treated as simple projects. But I would, in David's model, they're above governance. So I'm just wondering, scratching my head, like, okay, what do we understand as my reframing would be like there's some kinds of meta goals or like larger. So I think David says like to be achieved in a year frame, or in a frame of 1 to 3 years. Goals that are that big, like it's like as if there's a holarchic project unfolding. Like there's a big circle, like which is the big outcome, the goal, and then there's like little smaller outcomes are kind of part of that, and they may have sub projects under that and sub actions in the end, right? Because in the end you need to anchor everything in a concrete action. So that's how I envision at the moment how one could reconceive the goals level of GTD, and kind of connected with the definition of projects, which are there too, but they're below the level of roles, because roles energize projects, but they follow goals, which kind of go into that business plan direction. That's that's how I kind of try to make sense of it now currently.
Yeah. So this is an interesting intersection between two practices that are founded on the same principles, right? Pull-based, radical transparency, having multiple levels of focus using David's work. But the intersection is between personal productivity as a role filler, filling multiple roles at multiple levels of scale, potentially even in multiple organizations,
and private,
and private, and enacting your own personal purpose, right? So all of that nuance, all that facility to manage the complexity is baked into GTD. I love that, but I believe that unpacks much more personally how you, as a role filler, link outcomes or goals to projects, for example. So you inherit, as a role holder, you either inherit some outcomes that are asked of you in role, or with your essential intent to energize the role to the best of your ability, you're creating actions and projects for yourself in role.
By following the purpose of the role, you mean?
Purpose of the role, that's at one level horizon of focus. Purpose of the circle, maybe yet another. Purpose of the broader circle could even be another circle. So you have multiple circles with different purposes, multiple roles with different purposes. And this all impacts in your personal productivity GTD system. So that's how you would hold and then prioritize based on all the things that show up in GTD about energy, context, ability to do the work, pull-based, all that kind of next actionable step, all that kind of stuff builds a queue that you're pulling from based on your personal goals, objectives, and your role or organizational goals and objectives in role as a role filler.
I still have a gap in my, I just don't get together a certain concept, or they're still incoherent in my head, which is, so you also dropped the word essential intent. Let me see, so that's what I read in Aaron Dignan's book, Brave New Work, and he said it's Greg McKeown's term, the goal that sits between your ultimate vision and your quarterly objectives. And that would go into the direction of how I understand this goal level of the GTD practice, which is also, it's not the purpose, and it's not just one little project, but something in between. And I still would like to see something like that at Encode, some formulation of that. It's like, what's our, what do we want to achieve in 1 year? Like, and we, of course, this is predictive, the best way to predict the future is to create it. That's the other saying. So you got to throw yourself out there and able to be
Yeah.
and you could be totally wrong about that, and you could be totally like, oh no, that was a shitty goal, you know, but you only find out by pursuing it. So that's where the dynamism comes back into the picture. And,
Right.
yeah.
This is where it gets interesting and tricky, because I wouldn't push against any of that. I think all of that's true, but it's true on a continuum of good, better, and best practices based on your ability to do all that, understanding those nuances. So, for example, yes, you create your future by enacting it, and making a statement of you want to be somewhere in some period of time is one way to enact a future. Another way to enact a future is one present moment to the next. Of enacting.
And let me quote Ewan here. His article, it says, the convenient, and I found this interesting to reflect upon it for myself and asking, have I been just kidding myself? So he calls it the convenience of not setting goals. That's the title. Yeah. So setting intentions, like, or having a purpose, doesn't equal setting a goal. You know, you can say, okay, I set an intention and I surrender to what happens, and if it doesn't happen, well, I wasn't meant to be. And that lets you kind of out of the, you know, it's not that, this convenience of passivity, he calls it. There might be fear. Okay, I might fall short of reaching that goal if I was too concrete, so I better not set it, so I can't be hurt, or I can't be shamed. I don't, you know, my pride doesn't need to get hurt. So he basically advises, well, you have to, if you want to reach your dreams, whatever that is, your vision, you have to have goals. You cannot control the result, obviously. So there's some vulnerability and humility in that. But yeah, you just, you know, take on that cross to bear. You know, bear that cross to be able to create the future at all. Otherwise, it's just, I wouldn't say it's random but it's not. I wonder if it's how purposeful it can be if you don't connect actually the highest raison d'être, the highest reason for being here, with the concrete action or project that you're working on. And if there is nothing in between, there's no connecting tissue of goals or essential intent or whatever you want to call it, or business plan. I think there has to be, and I will gonna fight for that.
I will join you in the fight, because in fact, I would say Encodes is using now Two Purpose Institute understanding of purpose with the 4 components. One of the components of Encode's purpose is to connect power, work, and purpose, right? So connecting purpose and work is easy enough. You can unpack roles, accountabilities, and projects and outcomes, and then wait for something to happen. But that is not stepping into your power. Power makes something move forward. Owning your own power, risking you moving into your role and energizing your role's work or your own personal work in the world is part of owning your power. And acknowledging limits and constraints and failures, dealing with the fear that comes with that, I think this is critical. This is part of the holacracy adoption curve, right, of stepping into, we used to say a long time ago, and maybe it's still part of the teaching, make fear no longer as useful as it is in the conventional system. Okay to fail. It's okay to lead your role to figure out what's needed. And it's okay to call each other out. Really healthy peer pressure or role pressure in the tactical meetings specifically. You're reporting out on actions and projects and metrics. This is an area that doesn't get a lot of attention in holacracy early adoption or even later, or where people can kind of fall off the wagon.
That's where it gets warm.
It does. You get into a passive sort of non-confrontational approach. And this stalls progress. installs personal practice, and it is a feeding ground for resentment and interpersonal tension that's unprocessed, right?
Because you're not taking up on the operational duties part of the Constitution. Like, okay, you're not holding each other accountable. Like, oh, hey, wait a minute, you accepted that you took on that role. You said, I want to energize it, I want to process it, but you're not doing it, and I cannot get it from you, even if I ask you from that project from you. What is going on here? Why aren't you doing your job, essentially?
So, exactly. There are all kinds and varieties of reasons of why that shows up in organizations adopting holacracy. It's actually one of the things, one of the motivations behind Encode's work is to provide a people context where individuals can process those tensions in a structured way. It's like, hey, Dennis, damn, in this circle, what the hell are you doing in that writer role? And why aren't we seeing more content? And it's really a Dennis Tom thing. It's not a promoter role and a writer role where it's kind of aseptic and neutral. That's an important dynamic too. Role relationships, role dynamics, role friction, figuring that stuff out is important. But at some point, it does come to enacting and leading, empowering your roles, back to connecting power, purpose, and work. So this is why I said in my response to you on the Slack post, it's why there's such a bias towards action in holacracy. It's like lead, risk to fail, measure, KPIs, even projects. If you look in Glassfrog, there's a whole return on value metric on a particular project, the cost of a project versus the value of the project, and measuring that. Are we doing the right work at the right time?
Are we doing the most important work?
Exactly. Yes. And
it's all about,
it's
all about conscious intention and being very explicit about everything.
It is. So the structures are there, the processes are there, but you have to live into them. You have to bring yourself to them. Or the organization kind of languishes, flounders a bit, or stalls. And so that's why I was saying yes, and as soon as you artificially set any sort of, in 1 year I want to, you're pushing against dynamic steering principles, because you can't possibly imagine all the variables between now and next year. Much better to be in a system where you're regularly and very frequently sensing into what is your motivation and intent, either personally in the world or in role, and then incrementally small steps working towards manifesting that.
Yeah, right. But I was just thinking, if you want to build a house, then there's roles. One builds like the cellar and the swimming pool and the what have you, the first, but there's no, and you say, okay, you dynamically, everybody builds their part, and the overall purpose of you is building houses. But nobody's doing the architectural work of being the architect or telling anybody or filling that. Just laying out like how do the project pieces fit together to form actually a whole project, like a whole big project, not just a small project of this and that and the other. And that's, I guess, that's the meta project.
Well, here again, though, it can be whatever is needed, and this isn't sidestepping the issue. You want as light a weight a system as possible, and to the extent that the work doesn't require a meta architecture around it, just freaking do the work. Don't get a project.
And I was thinking of long value chains here and that kind of shit.
But there is complex work that needs coordinated effort. An architect, for sure. A project owner in the agile space. You have some core roles that are coordinating efforts, which is perfectly fine. That's just more work to unpack in governance to figure out what are the expectations, what are we counting on that role to do, right? And we're just playing the game to coordinate more complex work. That's perfectly fine.
And the projects of that role are like architectural plans or something like that. That's
coordinated efforts. That is perfectly reasonable within the rule set, and perfectly reasonable within the continuum of good, better, and best. It's how do you best. So in the architecture world, there's something called design build, right? Where you're actually building and designing kind of simultaneously, looking for, again, emergent, not to make that a pejorative or negative word, but for emergent opportunities to use different materials, to rethink a particular design element. And you can do design build. That doesn't mean not have an overall plan, because
just steering with the existing plan, I guess. Like, okay, we have, but yeah, you can only steer when you do have that plan, right?
Yeah, I think this is the fundamental shift that we're talking about, is learning how to play a different game. It's something I've said all along about holacracy. It's not trying to make the existing system better. It's actually just a different system. It's a different way to get work done. And we're learning still, a decade in, how to get good at playing that game. And not only just playing the organizational and operational game, but from an encode perspective, learning how to play the legal ownership and capital structure game, and the people structure game when we unhook from being employees with employers in command and control structures. So this is a big deal. This is
why. At the same time, I guess we're also playing the let's earn money to be at all in business game.
Of course, yeah. So in the conventional world, absolutely. Even in the purposeful world, we talk about this all the time. You know, money is not a purpose or an objective, but it certainly is. It is an absolute metric to measure health. Money is a representation of energy exchange, and you need a good, healthy value exchange.
Yeah. Like, right? Are we providing value to the world at all? Like, can we measure that by money, maybe?
Yeah, so we don't disparage profit, but we balance that profit on what's needed, what's sustainable, what's necessary to express the purposeful work in the world. So these are the dynamic steering principles, and really we're just kind of going down through now the 5 principles as ENCODE holds them. How do you unpack purpose in these kind of systems? How do you unpack structure? How do you dynamically steer the whole process? How do you do so with a high degree of visibility and transparency? You know, how do you play this game with these principles? How do you unpack all of that? How do you lead, back to the autonomy? Having the ability to step in and power your work, not be waiting on others for something, but to step in and lead your work. Having a strong sense of autonomy, intrinsic motivation, and essential intent is what I would say there. How do you find your essential intent?
Let's double click on that. So what is your understanding of that term? Like, how would you hold?
You know, I'd love, maybe that's another session. I don't know. It's I saw it in Aaron's book as well. I'm not familiar with the original source. I like it a lot. It resonates with me, but it does so a little bit different than it was articulated in the book. For me, it kind of goes as one more element of intrinsic motivation, more of a Dan Pink sort of treatment of what are the markers of being intrinsically motivated. What is your own sense? It goes, I think, for me anyway, to your own sense of purpose and your own resonance of personal purpose with broader purpose. What's your motivating energies to serve some purpose greater than yourself? How much energy, what's your orientation to that purpose? ENCODE, again, unpacked that in its earnings plan and created 3 different orientations to purpose. Do you have an intent to optimize something that's already there? Do you have an intent to build something new that's not already there? or do you have an intent to distill down something from nothing in bringing new constructs in to support the purpose? So I see it kind of more from that standpoint, which is different than how it's held in the book, and I may be totally off.
Yeah, no, it's interesting twist on that.
Yeah. So it's all about learning how to play the game, and honor the business fundamentals. So I don't think business plan is a bad word. I think the
it sounded like it in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like, ooh, don't touch that.
Right.
Well, it's like an allergic reaction to the kind of very conventional old, which is healthy if you want to actually push off to move.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like, okay, you gotta don't play with that.
Yeah.
Play with it.
So the elements of planning, yes. Deconstructing the business plan in a dynamically steered, self-organized system, yes. Scale it inside and out, from the broadest to the narrowest of focus, yes. These are all the things that I would fully support as a self-organized expression of business planning.
You wrote something also very interesting in the Slack channel about first the active emptiness and the doing and non-doing and doing. Can you elaborate that? Maybe that's worthwhile.
Yeah. So it's back to that autonomy thing of leading, and when this came early on in my holacracy practice, when we were talking about leadership in general. Usually the leader is active, beating the drum, right? Setting the stage and the pace, leading the business planning initiatives, making the hard calls, active, but from a command and control standpoint. Active, but from a command and control stance. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to get here. I am leading you. Have confidence in me to get you there, right? And these are all, quote, good leadership skills when done well and held well. I wouldn't push against that. But it's exactly what we don't do in a self-organized system. So what does leadership look like? And so for me, this was a learning and unlearning experience. And it kind of resolved into this phrase that I used of active emptiness. And it comes from meditation practice and a little bit of spiritual practice of being unattached to outcomes.
Yeah, Karma yoga. Is that?
Yeah, and these are good business practices too. Lean, agile, pivoting, right? Being able to take advantage of opportunities as they emerge based on real experience, real data, real market constraints, etc. Being very lean would be the conventional term, but active in that. The doing informs the next step. Unattached, whatever that step might be, you're working towards that step. It sounds like a paradox. You're actually working to bring something into the world, and then always evaluating. It's almost a witnessing, pulling back. Does this work? Is this viable? Is this sustainable? Is this moving us in a direction towards our purpose? It's an active witnessing or active emptiness.
Or like a researcher, like, this is hypothesizing and throwing out the hypothesis and right away testing it.
Absolutely. This goes right to the living laboratory nature of a self-organized system too. Everything's an experiment. It's dynamic steering brings and reshapes everything to be an experiment.
And it fractally mirrors in the facilitation process as well, right?
Absolutely.
You have the you throw out the proposal. It's an experiment, it might work, and then people throw in objections, and you even test them. Maybe we need to integrate them, maybe not. Maybe it's okay to not integrate.
Even in the conventional literature, in the conventional business literature, you're now seeing progressive leaders being touted for their ability to contradict something they vehemently supported the day before. and be able to unattach, to detach from that outcome that they fought for the day before, because it makes no sense today. And so it's being egoically unattached to those outcomes.
So the emptiness
so
is the not
attached to the purpose. You're actually attaching to the purpose and trying to express work in pursuit of that purpose that's sustainable, meaningful, repeatable, etc.
So the emptiness part is the non-attachment part, the active emptiness. What is the active part of the active emptiness? So it's throwing yourself out there and you're testing your hypotheses.
Exercising your autonomy. So it is leading yourself, leading your work, managing your fear, stepping into risk-taking, and actively pursuing something, not waiting on something to happen. You happening to it, not it happening to you. So when everybody's leading their work, then others can follow those that are leading, and the whole system begins to work and move things forward. So it's an active participatory process. It's not a passive waiting for the emergent to show up and say, oh, that's it. And that's being a little overly dramatic. I don't think anybody does that. But there's a sense of, there's a waiting on sense that can show up in a dynamically steered environment. And I think it's the opposite. It's a pushing in. Even when you're consciously saying, I'm not going to take an action because, it's the because part. It's exercising your conscious choice and autonomy. This is the action and non-action, right? So it's not just blindly acting. This is not what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's exercising your autonomy, knowing when to say no. No is sometimes the most important action you can take.
Yeah, the non-doing part of doing
another. No, we are not going to spend this money. No, we are not going to take on this new initiative.
Yeah, no, or just the very act of prioritizing your dynamic workflow is like, no, I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to do that, but I'm consciously not doing that because this is I decided this is more valuable, and the act of decision is the conscious part about it. You could also just take the bottom, the top of the stack and just work with that.
This is a cultivated skill. This is not easy, and this isn't natural. This is something we don't teach, and we haven't learned, generation over generation. These are new skills, I think, of learning how to lead your work, learning how to be autonomous, and make these decisions consciously, and not get complacent. It's the whole dynamic steering process unpacks, very richly here. It's the delay decision thing that gets talked about, right? Delay decisions, last responsible moment. True. Not procrastination, which is, again, the waiting on thing, or paralyzed by fear thing, or any number of things. It's being active in the process.
Whoa, lots to live into. As I'm listening, I'm realizing, it's like, it's ever deepening layers of self-reflection here, waiting for me to, ask myself, am I doing this? Am I living up to that?
I know. And I think the work we're doing, like in the PowerShift community and in the people context, is cultivating a tribe, a group that will help each other practice, call each other out in really good ways, be a mirror for one another about our own practice and where we might be falling, or being able to ask for help. Dennis, could you help me when I don't see I'm not acting autonomously, or I'm not leading my work, or not doing something? Could you help me understand that better? And I really like that space that's beginning to develop using these same principles.
Do you think like there could be like a ledger of agreements on those kinds of things? Please call me out when I do XYZ, or don't do XYZ.
I absolutely do. And we've experimented with it a little bit. Back at Holacracy 1, there's still such a thing. We had some fleeting experiments with it at Encode. it gets a little cumbersome. Again, if there's some software out there and a whole organization managing clear agreements
Are
and
you
making
listening
it
to us?
super fun, then I think that's really, needed in the world.
Yeah. Huh. So kind of a work commitments app or something like, or working agreement
it's a
app, or
variation of what's
tracking
already out
those
there.
kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, Dennis.
Mhm. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, we're about at the end of our hour together.
Yeah, I think we've touched on very interesting points. Yeah, do I have an answer to my question? Or what was my question? Well, the question was, how do goals fit into holacracy practice, like bigger goals, and are they equal to business plans? And well, I guess there were many questions. If I had a clearer question, I probably could answer the question if my question was answered.
Yeah.
But,
well, I think just to put a bow on it and be very concrete. So strategies live between purpose and governance. Strategy gives the broad sense of where we're putting priority, one thing over another, where we're allocating time, energy, talent. And then the next big outcome, a big goal, if you're looking from a business plan, what kind of big projects are at play? Big outcome, multi-action projects.
Yeah, or multi-circle projects, like that involve the work of many circles.
Absolutely. So we have an example of this at Encode. We have a strategy to raise some money, to get some capital in. So we have a project that has an outcome of capital raise enacted or some such thing. And that's huge. That will run the entire year. That is a business plan worthy project.
Okay.
That will unpack in multiple probably sub projects or actions.
Okay, I guess that something like that I was looking for. So now I'm getting feeling a sense of relief here. It's something moving in that direction. Yeah, some awareness of, okay, maybe just one person, the project maybe sit on one person's project board, but doesn't mean it doesn't spawn sub-projects in other circles or other roles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So,
all right.
Not what I needed for now.
Cool. Well, that was a good conversation. We'll see where this ends up on the recording, either for internal Encode use or maybe the PowerShift community. We'll see where it goes.
Cool.
All right, Dennis, thanks. It was good reconnecting. Those were some good discussions. Fun.
All right, then.
Yeah. Good luck with all your work too. That's amazing on Hyperport deployment.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
All right. Till next time then. Take care.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.